You won't need to make a speech, Dad. Everything's already been scripted. In the middle of the wedding reception, my daughter-in-law blocked my path with a cold smile. The entire hall fell silent. My son just stared at the floor. In that single moment, I understood I was being erased from the story of my own life. But they had no idea that Eleanor, my late wife, had left behind a secret powerful enough to turn the tables on everything. And from that second on, I began to prepare a response that would leave them utterly stunned. Before we continue, please subscribe to our channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments below. They say weddings bring families closer, but sometimes they just quietly show you how far apart you've already drifted. I had put on the suit Eleanor always said made me look like Gregory Peck. I had prepared a gift crafted from my own 2 hands and all my heart. But as I stood in that lavish wedding hall, brushed aside with a professional smile, I knew something inside me had just shattered, and that shattering would change everything. Ever since Eleanor passed 4 years ago, our house on Lake Michigan had felt far too large. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was an echo, a tangible presence that gnawed at everything. It crept into every corner, filled the empty chair across from me at the breakfast table, and turned the memory of Eleanor's laughter into a distant, aching sound. My days fell into a familiar rhythm. Coffee in the morning, work in my woodshop until my back ached, and a solitary dinner in front of the TV. The woodshop was the only place I still felt in control. The smell of pine and machine oil was a balm. In there, I was a craftsman, a creator. You put a piece of wood on the saw, and you knew exactly what it would become. You could see the outcome, feel the satisfaction of a perfect fit. Life outside that door no longer followed those rules. My son, Owen, visited less and less. The calls dwindled too, from a few times a week to a few times a month, and now only when he needed something. I told myself he was busy with his own life, his rising career in the city, a new woman. That's what parents do, isn't it? We rationalize the distance because the truth is too painful to face. The truth was, he had changed. He spoke in corporate jargon I didn't understand, and his laugh didn't have the same easy ring to it. He was like a polished replica of himself, a version designed to impress others. The phone rang one Tuesday afternoon, its shrillness startling. It was Owen. "Dad!" His voice on the other end was bright but distant, as if filtered through layers of glass. "I've got great news. Lauren and I are getting married." I leaned against the kitchen counter, trying to process the feeling. My boy was getting married. An image flashed in my mind. A 7-year-old Owen, a gap where his front tooth should be, proudly showing me a perch he'd just caught. Time is a cruel thief. "Well, that's wonderful news, son. Congratulations to you both." "It's in 3 weeks," he said quickly. "At the lakeshore, that new resort on Traverse Bay. It's going to be amazing, Dad." He talked about the plans, about a modern yet timeless wedding. I knew those were Lauren's words. I thought of my wedding to Eleanor, in a small church with a few dozen close friends and a simple backyard reception. Happiness then was so simple, so real. "Sounds grand," I said, trying to swallow a sigh. He didn't ask if I was free. He didn't ask for my opinion on a single thing. "Do you need any help?" I asked, a last-ditch effort to claim a sliver of my role. "I could build you a birch arbor, like the one in your grandparents' wedding photo." "No need, Dad, thanks," he cut in, his voice rushed. "We've hired an event planner. They're handling everything, A to Z. You just need to show up and look sharp." I hung up the phone and stared at it. I felt exactly as Eleanor had once described one of her friends. I had just been cast as a guest in a story I thought I'd helped write. A week before the wedding, I drove my old pickup to their new house. I had spent 60 hours in the workshop on their gift, a keepsake box made of walnut with perfect dovetail joints. With every push of the plane, every tap of the chisel, I thought of Owen, I thought of the wooden toys I'd made for him as a boy, of the first time I taught him to hold a hammer. This box wasn't just wood and varnish. It was my time, my patience, my love, made solid. Lauren answered the door. She was beautiful, radiant in expensive yoga attire, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. "Arthur," she said, "what a surprise. What brings you here?" "I came to give you two your wedding gift," I said, formally presenting the box. She took it, her perfectly manicured hands seeming hesitant to touch the wood. "Oh," she said, drawing out the word. "It's so rustic. Thank you." She glanced at Owen, who had just walked up, then around their minimalist living room, a space of clean lines, metal, and shades of gray. "It's just, I'm not sure where we'd put it. You know, it doesn't really go with our aesthetic." Owen just gave a weak, apologetic smile. "Lauren's got a great eye, Dad. I'm sure she'll find a spot for it somewhere." He looked at me as if pleading with me not to make a scene. "Yes," Lauren said, her voice sweet but cold. "Perhaps I can use it for odds and ends in the storage room. It would be very useful." A polite dismissal, one of 1,000 tiny silent cuts you endure. I didn't stay for a drink. On the drive home, I wondered if I had simply become too obsolete for my son's new world. On the day of the wedding, I arrived early, wearing the suit Eleanor had loved. The resort was as stunning as I'd imagined, with great oak beams and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering lake. But its splendor only made me feel more out of place. It started with small things. The name tag on my lapel simply read, Arthur Hartley, with no father of the groom, as I saw on Lauren's father's. An event coordinator politely guided me to a table in the far back corner of the room, where I sat with Owen's distant work colleagues. The photographer's camera panned past me twice without stopping. I watched Lauren's father hold court, people congratulating him, shaking his hand. I was just an old man in the corner. Then came the speeches. Lauren's father, Lauren's brother, Lauren's best friend. They told stories, they gave blessings, they raised their glasses. I sat there, waiting for a moment that would never come. The sting from the week before, compounded by the humiliation of the present, began to simmer inside me. This wasn't an oversight. This was deliberate. I was his father. I would not be quietly erased from his life. Eleanor would not have wanted me to sit here and take it. I stood up, took my glass of wine, and started walking toward the stage. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. Curious eyes turned my way. I saw Owen look at me, panic clear on his face. When I was just a few feet from the stage, Lauren rose. She moved like a panther in her pristine white dress, intercepting me. Her smile was still radiant, a perfect mask. "Arthur," she said, her voice low but sharp as a knife. "Where are you going?" "I just wanted to say a few words. To toast the happy couple," I replied, my voice a little hoarse. Her smile didn't waver. "Oh, I appreciate the thought. I really do. But everything has been scripted with the professional MC. We wouldn't want to disrupt the flow of the program, would we?" It was a command, not a question. A public humiliation wrapped in a veneer of politeness. I looked over at Owen, searching for a lifeline, a supportive glance, anything. But he wasn't looking at me. He was staring down at the table, his hands clenched in his lap, still as a statue. He had chosen a side. And it wasn't mine. The entire room seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what I would do. The anger in me cooled, replaced by a cold, hollowing emptiness. I had lost. "I understand," I whispered, though I'm not sure anyone could hear. I turned and walked, a straight line through the tables, past the unfamiliar faces. I didn't go back to my seat. I walked straight for the door. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit my face. I loosened my tie. Behind me, the music swelled again, the party resuming as if nothing had happened. No one followed me. No one said goodbye. I sat in my pickup truck, staring at the bright lights of the resort. The fracture was no longer silent. It was a chasm, and I was standing on my side of it, completely alone. The silence after the wedding was heavier than the silence of loneliness. It carried the weight of humiliation. I didn't get a call, not a single text of apology. It was as if I had simply evaporated from my son's life, and no one had bothered to notice. I spent the following days in the woodshop, trying to work the thoughts out of my head with my hands. I planed boards until my shoulders screamed, the shriek of the machine drowning out the echo of Lauren's voice. But every time I stopped, the quiet rushed back in, and with it, the image of Owen sitting perfectly still, choosing silence over his own father. That image played on a loop, painfully clear. His eyes fixed on the table, his hands clenched, a statue of cowardice. He hadn't just failed to take my side, he had actively chosen to do nothing, and that inaction was a betrayal more cruel than any words. A few weeks later, the first storm of the season hit. I sat in the living room, listening to the rain lash against the windows like angry fists. The wind howled through the eaves, a mournful, wailing sound. And then I heard it. A small, steady sound that cut through the storm's roar. Drip, drip, drip. It was coming from upstairs, near the fireplace. I looked up and saw a dark brown stain slowly spreading across the plaster ceiling. In its center, a single drop of water was forming, swelling, and then letting go, falling onto Eleanor's old Persian rug. Drip, drip. The sound of decay. The sound of a house that, like me, was slowly falling apart from the inside. Each drop was a tick of a clock, a reminder of the fragility of everything I had tried to hold together. The next day, I called a contractor. He was a big man with calloused hands who spent the morning walking around on my roof. When he came down, his face was grim. "Mr. Hartley," he said, taking off his baseball cap. "It's not good news. The shingles are completely rotten through. The underlayment is shot. This isn't a simple patch job. You need a whole new roof." I nodded, bracing myself. "How much are we talking about?" He handed me a piece of paper. I looked at the number at the bottom. $42,000. The air left my lungs. My pension and savings were just enough to get by. This number felt like a death sentence. "I know it's a shock," the contractor said, seeing my face. "But you can't put this off. Winter's coming, and the snow will make it a whole lot worse." I thanked him and saw him to the door. I stood in the hallway, holding the estimate, feeling the weight of it in my hand. This house was all I had left of Eleanor. Every corner, every scuff on the hardwood floor held a memory. The thought of letting it rot was unbearable, but the thought of taking on that kind of debt at my age was terrifying. Just then, the phone rang. It was Owen, for the first time since the wedding. "Dad," he said, his voice laced with concern. "I heard you guys got a big storm. Are you okay?" A tiny, foolish flicker of hope ignited in me. Maybe he did care. Maybe he felt remorse. "I'm fine, son, but the house isn't. The roof is leaking badly." "Oh no, how bad is it?" "It's bad," I admitted, my voice weary. "I just got an estimate. The whole thing needs to be replaced." "Damn. What's the damage, Dad?" His tone shifted, becoming more practical, less emotional. "It's a lot, Owen. 42,000. There was a pause on the other end of the line. 42,000? He repeated. "That's a huge number. How are you going to manage that? Do you have enough in savings?" "No," I said honestly. "I don't." "So, are you going to get a bank loan? The interest rates at your age must be high. Have you thought about that?" His questions came one after another, not as words of comfort, but as a financial interrogation. "I don't know yet, Owen. I'm still trying to figure it out." "Listen, Dad," he said, his voice now full of resolve. I'm coming over this Friday night. Lauren's got something on. You and I will have dinner and talk. We need to figure out a plan. You can't handle this on your own. I agreed, feeling a strange sense of relief. Maybe this was his way of showing he cared. Practical, planned. Maybe I'd been too hard on him. Maybe this was a chance to mend things. On Friday, I drove to Owen's house with a fragile bit of hope in my chest. But when I walked in, I didn't smell any food cooking. The dining room was starkly set, and on the glass table, there was only a single uncorked bottle of red wine and 2 glasses. In the center of the table, instead of plates, sat a neatly clipped stack of papers. "Hey, Dad," Owen said, leading me in. "Have a seat. Let me get you some wine." I sat down, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. "I thought you said dinner?" "We'll order something in a bit," he said, pushing the stack of papers toward me. "First, I wanted to show you this. I think this is the solution to our problem." I picked up the papers. The bold print on the first page hit me like a punch. Durable power of attorney. "I had the lawyers at my firm draw it up," Owen said casually, as if discussing the weather. "It'll make things so much easier, especially with the roof. If you sign this, I can deal with the bank on your behalf, sign contracts with the roofers, draw from your accounts to pay them. You won't have to worry about any of the paperwork. I'll take care of the entire burden." I stared at him. The last shred of my naivete died. The roof wasn't an unfortunate accident. It was an opportunity. A perfect excuse. "You're talking about taking control of my finances," I said, my voice flat and cold. "Not control, Dad," he corrected, his smile unwavering. "Management. Help. You're getting older, and this stuff is complicated. I just want to make sure you're taken care of, that your assets are protected." Protected from whom? From me? I set the papers down on the table. The soft thud echoed in the silent room. "I'm not signing this," I said. The calm mask on Owen's face slipped, replaced by a flash of impatience. "Dad, don't be stubborn. This is the most logical thing to do. You're letting emotion get in the way of a financial decision." "This isn't a financial decision, Owen," I said, getting to my feet. "This is about trust, and you've lost mine." I turned and walked out the door, leaving him sitting alone with his wine and his papers. On the drive home, I didn't feel anger. Just a deep, chilling sadness. I didn't drive straight home. I found myself pulling into a small, deserted lot by the lake, a place where I'd taught Owen to skip stones. The night was still, the water a black mirror reflecting cold, distant stars. I killed the engine and sat in the dark. The anger was gone, replaced by a profound emptiness. Where did I go wrong? The question bored into me. Did I give him too much? Did I raise a man who only understood the value of $1 and had forgotten the value of a son? I remembered all the times he had asked, and Eleanor and I had given, thinking it was love. We had paved his way, removed every obstacle, and in doing so, perhaps we had robbed him of his own strength, of his gratitude. I felt like a complete failure as a father, a failure that weighed more than a collapsing roof. I had given my son everything except the one thing that mattered, a moral compass. Sitting there, in the lonely dark, I felt I had lost it all. When I got home, I went straight to the basement. The air was damp and cold. In a far corner, behind the old washing machine, was a steel footlocker where Eleanor had always kept important things. I opened it. Inside, there was a small metal box. She had told me about it once, years ago. "If anything ever happens to me," she'd said, "and you truly need it, everything you need is in here." I'd never had a reason to open it, until tonight. The lid creaked. Inside, everything was perfectly organized, just like Eleanor. And on top was a letter, with "For Arthur," written in her elegant script. My hands trembled as I opened it. "My dearest Arthur," it began. "If you are reading this, it means I'm no longer there to protect you. I know you. You would never ask for help, not even from our son. So I took care of things myself. This is everything I built and inherited. I kept it separate for a reason. I worry about Owen. I see the way he looks at what we have, not with pride, but with impatience. I'm afraid that one day that impatience will cloud his love for you. Don't tell him about this money unless you absolutely have to. Use it to live your life, on your terms. This is not a burden. This is your freedom." Beneath the letter were files, investment account statements, property deeds, bonds. I turned the pages, my vision blurring. I did a rough calculation of the numbers in my head. Then I did it again, not believing my eyes. All told, it was worth over $7 million. I sank to the cold basement floor, the open metal box beside me. The $42,000 roof estimate now seemed laughably small. But this wasn't just about money. This was Eleanor's foresight. This was her final act of protection. And then a memory surfaced, as clear as yesterday. Owen, 17 years old, slamming his bedroom door. He had wanted a sports car for his birthday, not the used pickup I was offering him. Later that night, after things had quieted down, Eleanor had sat with me on the porch. "It's not just the car, you know," she had said softly. "It's what the car represents. Status, power. I see it in his eyes. We have to be careful, Arthur. Our love can't turn him into someone weak and entitled." I hadn't fully understood her then. I'd thought it was just youthful rebellion. But now, sitting on my basement floor, I understood. Eleanor had seen this coming. She had seen the chasm forming, even while I was still busy trying to build a bridge. I closed the box. This reversal of fortune didn't bring me joy. It brought me a cold resolve. The game had changed. And now, it was my move. The next morning, I was up before the sun. The raw anger of the night before had cooled into a quiet, steely purpose. The grief was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but it no longer paralyzed me. It had been forged into something harder. Resolve. Eleanor hadn't left me a weapon to be kept in storage. She had handed me a shield, and it was time I learned how to use it. I made a pot of coffee and for once drank the whole thing. Its bitterness sharpened my focus. I sat at the kitchen table, Eleanor's metal box before me. I didn't open it again. I didn't need to. Its contents were seared into my mind. I pulled out an old address book, its pages yellowed with age, and found a name I hadn't called in years: Frank Kowalski. Frank and I had been through 2 wars together, one in Vietnam and another in a courtroom when our old company tried to cheat us out of our pensions. We'd won both. Frank went on to become an estate lawyer, a man who had seen enough of the dark side of families to be cynical but had somehow held onto his decency. He'd retired a few years back, moved to a small place on the other side of the lake. I dialed his number. He picked up on the second ring. "Frank?" I said. "Arthur? My God, is that really you?" His voice was as booming as ever. "I thought you'd decided to become a mountain hermit." "I need your help, Frank, as a lawyer." The humor vanished from his voice instantly. "I'm listening." We met an hour later at a small diner in town. Frank looked older, more silver in his hair, but his eyes were just as sharp. I placed 2 things on the table between us: the power of attorney papers from Owen and Eleanor's metal box. Frank put on his reading glasses and went through Owen's documents first. He read slowly, shaking his head slightly from time to time. When he was done, he pushed the papers away as if they were something unclean. "The bastard," he said, not as an angry curse, but as a cold, factual observation. "Arthur, this wasn't written to take care of you. The language is predatory, immediate power, no oversight, irrevocable. This was written to consume you, to make you a tenant in your own life. Then he carefully opened Eleanor's box, going through each document with a professional's respect. He examined the financial statements, the deeds, the terms of the mutual funds. Eleanor was a brilliant woman, he said softly, almost to himself. She diversified everything, protected the assets from unnecessary risk. This is all rock solid. He looked up at me. And it's all in your name. Clean as a whistle. You have more power than you think, my friend. So what do we do? I asked. We don't play defense, Frank said, a glint in his eye. We go on the offensive. We're going to set up an irrevocable trust. We're moving everything, every last cent into it. You will be the sole trustee. No one, not even Owen, can touch it without your express permission. We're going to build a fortress around Eleanor's legacy, and we're going to give you the only key. For the next 2 days, we worked relentlessly. Frank called in favors from old colleagues, from financial experts. Calls were made, papers were signed, accounts were transferred. I felt like I was preparing for battle, arranging my troops, fortifying my position. Every signature I put down was another brick in that fortress wall. At the end of the second day, with everything done, Frank and I sat on my porch, looking out at the lake. Everything was now secured in the Eleanor Hartley Irrevocable Trust. I was safe. Frank turned to me, his lawyer face gone, replaced by the face of a friend. You know, Arthur, he said gently, once you put these papers on the table, there might be no coming back. Are you ready for your relationship with Owen to be changed forever? His question hung in the cool afternoon air. I looked out at the calm water, thinking of the little boy I used to carry on my shoulders, of the pride I felt at his college graduation. I already lost Eleanor, I said, my voice thick. I don't want to lose my son, too. But maybe the son I knew has been gone for a long time, Frank. The man who sat by while his wife humiliated me. The man who used my vulnerability against me. That's not my son. I'm not fighting Owen. I'm protecting myself from that man. Frank nodded, placing a hand on my shoulder. You're doing the right thing, Arthur. The call came the next evening. It was Owen. This time, his voice was contrite. Dad, it's me, he said. I've been doing a lot of thinking. I overreacted the other night. I'm sorry. I was just worried about you. What if we tried again? A proper dinner. I'll make those ribs you like. No papers, no pressure. Just talk. The performance was perfect, but I was no longer in the audience. All right, Owen, I said, my voice even. Tomorrow night. I arrived at his house, this time carrying no hope, only a thin file in my jacket pocket. The smell of roasting ribs filled the air. The table was set with plates, silverware, and neatly folded napkins. A carefully staged normalcy. We made small talk through the meal, the weather, a baseball team. Owen was good at this, at creating the illusion of intimacy. After dinner, as we were having coffee, he made his move. Look, Dad, he said, his voice hesitant. I know you didn't like those papers the other night. They were too aggressive. I talked to the lawyer again, and they drew up a much simpler version. He reached for another folder on a side table and slid it across to me. This is just a medical power of attorney, and a small provision to help manage your bills if you ever need it. Nothing major, just to keep things running smoothly. I looked at the folder, then into his eyes. I didn't touch it. Instead, I slowly pulled my own file from my jacket pocket. It was a single page. I placed it on top of Owen's stack of papers. The sound of paper on paper was loud in the silence. It was the official notification of the establishment of the Eleanor Hartley Irrevocable Trust, with my signature at the bottom. Owen picked it up, confused. I watched his face as he read. The confidence drained away, replaced by bewilderment. Then the bewilderment gave way to dawning realization, and finally, a cold fury settled in his eyes. The mask was off. What is this? He stammered. A trust? Who have you been talking to? I've been taking care of my own affairs, Owen, I said, my voice calm. Everything is in order. Everything is final. You can't do this, he nearly shouted, jumping to his feet. That's family money. No, I said, rising as well. It was your mother's money, and now it's mine, and I will protect it. Just then, the doorbell rang. Owen flinched. I walked over and opened it. Frank was standing there, smiling politely. Hello, Owen, Frank said, stepping inside. I'm Frank, an old friend and your father's legal counsel. I'm just here to ensure this conversation remains civil. Owen looked from Frank to me, his face pale with rage and defeat. He had lost. He knew it. We'll be going now, I said, grabbing my coat. Frank and I walked out the door, leaving Owen standing alone in his living room, amid the smell of ribs and the wreckage of his perfect plan. As we stepped into the crisp night air, for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. The war might not be over, but I had won the most important battle. I had taken back my power. The crisp night air felt like an antidote washing over me. On the drive home, Frank was quiet, and I was grateful for it. There were no hollow congratulations, no probing questions. He just drove, the silence in the car a respectful companion. The war might not be over, but I had won the most important battle. I had taken back my power, but the victory tasted bitter. It didn't feel like triumph, just a cold, empty space where a relationship used to be. I had built a fortress to protect myself, and in doing so, I had locked my son out. When I got home, I sat alone in the dark living room, not bothering with the lights. I didn't want to see the empty chairs, the photos on the walls. About an hour later, my phone buzzed on the table. A text message. From Owen. My heart gave a single hard thump. An apology, perhaps? Remorse? I opened it. The screen lit up, illuminating the cold, hard words. You made this so much harder than it needed to be. No greeting, no sign-off. Just an accusation. A final twist of the knife. I stared at the screen until it went dark. Harder than it needed to be. For whom? For him, of course. His plan was ruined. His easy path was blocked. I hadn't behaved like a docile, confused old man. I hadn't meekly handed over the keys to my kingdom. I put the phone down. The anger was gone, replaced by a profound, weary sadness. I got up and went to the cabinet where Eleanor kept the old photo albums. I pulled one out, its leather cover worn soft with time, and sat down under the reading lamp. I turned the pages. Owen at 5, cheeks red from the snow, holding up a toy truck, grinning so wide I could count the gaps in his teeth. Owen at 12, in an oversized baseball uniform, looking both proud and awkward. Owen at 18, on his graduation day, his arms around Eleanor and me, his smile as bright as the future we had hoped for him. I had been a good father, I thought. I taught him how to fish, how to change a tire, how to treat a woman with respect. But looking at these pictures now, I saw something else. I saw a boy who never really had to fight for anything. If his bike broke, I fixed it. If he wanted the latest basketball shoes, Eleanor bought them. We thought love meant removing obstacles, taking on burdens. We had given so much that somewhere along the way, he began to believe he was entitled to what wasn't his. Eleanor's warning echoed in my mind. Our love can't turn him into someone weak and entitled. We had failed. I had failed. I had raised a man who believed love was a transaction and family was a financial safety net. His text wasn't an outburst of anger. It was the voice of deep disappointment that an investment had failed to pay out. I closed the album. This house was no longer a sanctuary. It was a museum of my mistakes. Every room was haunted by the ghosts of a family I no longer recognized. The next morning, I called a real estate agent. 2 months later, I moved. The new house was much smaller, in a quieter neighborhood on the other side of town, a place with old oak trees and modest bungalows. It didn't have a view of the lake, but it had a small backyard and a garage big enough for a workshop. I thought leaving would be a relief, but as the last moving truck pulled away, leaving me alone amid a sea of unopened cardboard boxes, a sudden panic seized me. The silence here was different. It held no memories. It was just empty. I was no longer Arthur Hartley, who lived in the big house by the lake. I was just an old man in a strange house, surrounded by the fragments of a different life. For the first few days, I felt like a ghost. I went to the grocery store and felt lost among the young families laughing over their full carts. I tried to watch a favorite TV show but couldn't focus, my mind drifting back. I walked around the new neighborhood, but everything was unfamiliar, from the houses to the faces that passed me without a nod. I picked up the phone once, ready to call Frank, just to hear a familiar voice. But I put it back down. What would I say? That I was scared? That I was lonelier than I had ever been in my life? I didn't want to be a burden. This isolation was profound and tangible. The feeling of being invisible I'd felt at Owen's wedding was now my daily reality. To fight it off, I decided to get to work. I started with something simple, assembling a bookshelf. I'd built far more complicated things hundreds of times, but today my hands felt clumsy. The instructions looked like a foreign language. I dropped a screw, and it rolled into a dark corner. When I bent down to find it, a sharp pain shot through my back. I tried to tighten a bolt, and I stripped the thread. Frustration rose in me, hot and acidic. I put all my weight into holding a shelf in place, but it slipped, slamming against my shin. A bolt of pure pain shot up my leg, and I broke. I threw the screwdriver across the room. It clattered loudly against the bare floor. I sank down amidst the wooden planks and plastic bags of hardware, and I wept. Not silent tears, but the racking, painful sobs of a man who had held himself together for too long. I cried for Eleanor. I cried for the son I had lost. And most of all, I cried for myself, for my own crushing loneliness and helplessness in this empty room. I had won the war with Owen, but here, among the cardboard boxes, I felt like a total loser. I don't know how long I sat there. When I finally managed to get up, my knees were stiff and my eyes were swollen. I looked at the mess on the floor. The bookshelf was still in pieces. But something had shifted. The storm of emotion had passed, leaving a tired calm in its wake. I knew I couldn't just sit here forever. A few days later, I forced myself out of the house. I wandered the new neighborhood with no destination in mind. And then I saw it, an old brick building at the end of a side street with a simple wooden sign that read, Pinewood Community Woodshop. Through the large windows, I could see other men, most of them around my age, working at saws and lathes. The familiar smell of sawdust hung in the air. I stood outside for a long time before I worked up the courage to go in. Inside, the noise of the machines was loud but orderly. No one paid me any mind at first. They were all focused on their work. I walked around, watching one man turning an intricate table leg, another carefully assembling a child's cradle. "Can I help you, friend?" a deep voice said beside me. I turned. A man with a kind face and a white beard was looking at me. I was just looking," I stammered. "New in town?" he asked. "I'm George." "Arthur," I said, shaking his hand. "Welcome to the club, Arthur," George said. "If you need to use a machine, help yourself. Just sign the logbook." I didn't work right away. For the first week, I just came, poured myself a coffee, and sat in a corner watching. I listened to the conversations. Not about ungrateful children or old ailments, but about types of wood, the best angle for a mortise joint, how to get a perfect finish on a varnish. Then one day, George was struggling with a complex design for a cabinet. "Damn it," he muttered. "I can't get this angle right." I walked over. "Let me see," I said. I looked at the drawing, then at the piece of wood. "If you try a bevel cut here and use a different joint..." I spent the rest of the afternoon helping George. We didn't talk much. We communicated in nods, hand gestures, and the shared language of craftsmen. When we fit the final piece into place, it was a perfect, seamless match. George clapped me on the back. "Thanks, Arthur. You really know your stuff." For the first time in a long, long time, I felt useful. I started going to the woodshop every day. I brought my unfinished projects from home and started new ones. I repaired an old chair for a neighbor, made some toys for a local charity. There, I wasn't a failed father or a grieving widower. I was just Arthur, the woodworker. My hands found their purpose again. The silence there was different. It was the silence of concentration, punctuated by the hum of a lathe or the click of a chisel. It was the silence of men who were comfortable in each other's company without needing to fill the space with meaningless words. We shared coffee, jokes, and the occasional piece of advice. Slowly, piece by piece, I began to put myself back together. The wound was still there, a scar that would never fade. But it no longer ached. I was rebuilding my life, not from what was lost, but from what I had left: my hands, my skills, and a newfound peace. I was putting down new roots, like something finally ready to grow again. Autumn arrived gently in Michigan that year, bringing crisp air and the rustle of golden leaves. My life had settled into a new rhythm, a peaceful cadence set by the whine of a saw and the scent of linseed oil. The Pinewood Community Woodshop had become my second home. I had new friends, men like George, with whom I shared comfortable silences and the occasional old joke. We didn't talk about our pasts, not because we were hiding anything, but because we all understood it was the present that mattered. The certainty of a straight cut, the satisfaction of a perfect joint. I was finishing a cradle made of cherry wood, a gift for George's first grandchild. My hands moved with a familiar grace, motions I had repeated thousands of times. But there was a difference now. I was no longer working to chase away ghosts. I was working for the simple joy of creation. It was a Saturday afternoon, as I was wiping the final coat of oil onto the cradle, that George came over and put a hand on my shoulder. "You've got a visitor, Arthur," he said quietly. I looked up toward the entrance. Standing there, hesitating in the doorway, was Owen. He looked different. The sharp business suit was gone, as was the easy confidence. He wore an old jacket and faded jeans. He was thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. The swagger was gone from his posture, replaced by the slump of someone who had seen too many sleepless nights. He didn't look like a man who had come to make demands. He looked like a lost boy. I set my rag down, my heart giving an unsteady beat. I nodded to George and slowly walked toward my son. The other men in the shop sensed the tension, and the sounds of machinery slowly died down. "Hello, Owen," I said, my voice calmer than I felt. "Hi, Dad," he replied, his voice hoarse. He didn't meet my eyes, looking down at his shoes instead. Can I talk to you for a minute?" I led him outside to an old bench that overlooked the back lot of the woodshop. We sat, a small but significant space between us. The autumn wind blew past, carrying the smell of fallen leaves and damp earth. He was silent for a long time, lacing and unlacing his fingers. Finally, he took a deep breath. "I lost everything, Dad," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Not the money. Lauren, she left. She said I'd changed, that I'd become obsessed, bitter, and she was right." He looked up at me then, and for the first time in years, I saw real, unguarded vulnerability in his eyes, not masked by arrogance or calculation. When you put those papers on the table, he continued, I didn't get it. I just felt rage. I thought you had taken something that belonged to me. But later, after Lauren was gone, I had a lot of time to think in that empty house, and I realized that what I'd really lost wasn't control of your assets. I'd lost myself. I'd lost my moral compass. I let greed and insecurity turn me into someone I don't even recognize. Tears welled in his eyes. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry for everything, for the wedding, for the things I said, for not being the son you and Mom raised me to be. I'm sorry I hurt you. The apology wasn't a tactic. It was the truth. A raw, painful truth. I could see it. I looked away toward the old oak trees. The anger I had carried for so long seemed to dissolve, leaving a quiet stillness in its place. I forgive you, I said softly. Owen looked up, a flicker of hope in his tired eyes. I turned to look him straight in the eye, and I went on. But you need to understand something, Owen. Forgiveness doesn't come with a key. It doesn't automatically unlock doors that have been closed. Trust is like one of those ceramic vases your mother loved. Once it's broken, no matter how carefully you glue it back together, the cracks will always be there. It takes time, a lot of time, to build something new from the pieces. He nodded, a tear tracing a path down his cheek. He didn't argue, didn't make excuses. He just accepted it. I understand, he whispered. I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know I was sorry. We sat for a while longer in silence. The wind rustled the bare branches. A bird hopped across the grass, oblivious to us. Finally, he stood up. I should go, he said. Thank you for listening. He turned and walked back to his car. I didn't call after him, didn't wave. I just sat and watched him go, and when his car turned the corner and disappeared, I still sat. But I didn't sit there forever. After a moment, I stood and went back inside the woodshop. It was quiet now, my friends having all gone home. All that was left was the smell of pine and the warm yellow light shining down on the cherry cradle I was making for George's first grandchild. I didn't rush. I picked up a piece of fine grit sandpaper, the good stuff, and began to gently sand the curved rail of the cradle. My motions were slow, deliberate, and full of purpose. I was no longer trying to chase away ghosts or fill a silence. I was simply working, creating. Some things, I thought, can't be mended back to what they were. My relationship with Owen, the trust that was lost, it would never be the same. The cracks would always be there. But from the pieces, you can always build something new, something beautiful in its own way. The first snow of the season began to fall softly outside the window, white flakes swirling in the light of the street lamp. I kept sanding, feeling the wood grow smoother and smoother under my calloused fingers. I was creating new life from a block of wood, a new beginning for a small soul about to enter the world. And in that moment, I knew I was doing the same for myself. I didn't feel victorious, and I didn't feel sad, just a sense of acceptance. Because sometimes, the first step back isn't about walking towards someone else. It's about learning to sit still without being pulled under. That evening, I returned to my small house. I built a fire in the hearth and sat with a blanket over my lap, my hands wrapped around a warm mug of tea. The first snow of the season was falling outside my window, soft white flakes swirling in the glow of the street lamp. The house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full, not with things, but with peace. A peace that came not from fixing the past, but from accepting the present and building a new future. I had found my life again, not in a big house by a lake, but in the hum of a lathe, in the nod of a friend, and in the quiet stillness of a winter evening. The wound was still there, a reminder of what was lost, but it no longer defined me. I was Arthur, the woodworker. And for the first time in a long, long time, that was more than enough. My peace was earned. If you found this story compelling, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear our next story, click on the box on the left of your screen. Thank you for watching.